Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 55, Oy Vey, You're Gay.
But before Debbie summarizes the episode, we are very excited to welcome back our friend Miranda. Say hi, Miranda.
Hi. Hey, everybody.
Hey, we're glad you're back.
We are.
I'm happy to be back.
Excellent. All right. So, as usual, we'll sort of start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell came home dejected and inebriated after attending a party at which no woman was interested in talking to him. Fran pinpoints the cause, his wedding ring, which can be a big turnoff to single women. The hits just keep on coming. Cece then informs Maxwell that his nemesis, Andrew Lloyd Webber, just appeared in the New York Times crossword puzzle. Cece comes up with the perfect solution: hire a publicist. And she knows the perfect man, Sydney Mercer. When Sydney Mercer, the attractive blonde daughter of Sydney Mercer, arrives at the Sheffield house, she asks Maxwell to put himself in her hands, and he agrees over Cece's objection. Sydney begins to reshape Maxwell's image, changing his entire attitude and worldview. To celebrate, he asks her to dinner on Saturday night at the Rainbow Room, and he is ready to make a commitment to her, as indicated by his decision to remove his wedding ring. Because of a miscommunication, Sydney arrives at the Sheffield home after Maxwell has already left, and Fran tries to inquire about her future in the household, only to learn that Sydney is not interested in Maxwell because of his gender. Turns out, Sydney's gay and had been planning to ask Fran out since she assumed that Fran was also gay because Fran was over 30, had never been married, and there was no guy in her life. Fran corrects her, saying that she's not gay, just pathetic. And then she races to try to catch Maxwell, and they end up stuck in a stalled elevator. As they talk, Fran tries to make a break for it through the top of the elevator, but ends up getting stuck. Just as Maxwell expresses his concern that he wouldn't know the right woman for him if she fell out of the sky, Fran gets dislodged and falls to the ground next to him. Bernadette, Miranda, would you like to add anything to the summary?
That's a good overview. We'll get into some of the particulars as we go scene by scene, but is there anything you want to add, Miranda?
No, I think that's pretty good. Hey, it covers it.
All right. Bernadette, would you like to start us off in the office?
Yes. So we open up in the office. Niles is having a very good time. He is swirling around in a glass, I assume whiskey or some type of, hard alcohol. He has a cigar in his other hand. His legs are crossed on the desk in front of him as he leans back in Maxwell's chair. Again, he's having a great time. And
Yes.
then, the door opens, so that kind of startles him. But oh, it's just Fran. Fran walks in and she, says, "Calm down, Niles. It's just me. I'm sure Hillary's caught Al Gore doing the same thing." And so Niles says, "Well, let me finish the fantasy." And so he goes, "Miss Babcock, you're fired." And then Fran goes, "Because?" And then Niles says, "I'm in love with Miss Fine." And I gotta say, this is a great instance again of Niles really shipping the whole Maxwell and Fran.
Yes.
Ship.
Yes.
So again, they're talking. He just loves. I'm trying to see here. So I think Fran's asking about Maxwell's whereabouts, and Niles is kind of like this is a little crossover from last episode. I almost feel he's like, "Well, if you must know, and I know you must know, he's gone to a party.
Right.
Get out of here." That's what I told him. He's kind of in the gossipy kind of mood.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran's like, "You know what this means?" And Niall says he's finally letting go of the past and joining the world of the living. And Fran's like, "No, his jacuzzi tub is free." And then Niles is like, "Oh, but there's a problem with that. It's taken," and he like jumps up. So we start a little race between Fran and Niles. And Fran gets out of the office first and locks it. And so we're kind of in the hallway at this point, and she's like, "Oops, I locked the door. And look how dirty the key is. I should wash it in the jacuzzi." But behind Fran, further down the hall, is an outdoor doorway, and Niles comes through it and says, "Na na 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 na." na." And Fran laments that there's too many doors. It's like laughing, and they run into the living room. And as they're in the living room, about to run up the stairs, the phone rings, and they both kind of stop and look at it. And of course, Fran's like, "Aren't you going to answer it?" And Niles is like, "I can let a phone ring. Can you?" And and Fran's like, "Oh, it's fine." They're both trying not to be the one to answer the phone because that'll leave them at a disadvantage. And Niles is like, "It could be that, man you were talking to your mother about." And she's like, "No, it couldn't be him. Why not? I made him up." And Niles tries again. "Oh, it could be Visa calling to increase your limit." And eventually Fran does answer the phone. And it turns out it is Mr. Sheffield. And we've learned he's had too much to drink. "Okay, you know, I'll come get you." And as Fran, hangs up and goes towards the door, Niles offers that he'll get his coat as well. And Fran tells him, "Don't bother." And she just opens the front door, and there Mr. Sheffield is, clearly drunk.
Yes.
And and again, to the point where Fran makes the comment like it's 100 proof, like she can smell it, right? "Don't
Mhm.
light a match." And Niles is kind of asking Fran, like, "Didn't you have your dad come home, inebriated before?" And she's like, "We're Jewish. He comes home gaseous." Again, don't light a match.
Right.
Uh, and then Maxwell, again, very clearly drunk, starts singing "If You Want My Body and You Think I'm Sexy." So the song by Rod Stewart. And both Fran and Niles are like kind of amused, but they know, he's not that's not attractive for even Rod Stewart anymore.
Right.
And then they help him up the stairs, both of them. So again, in this opening scene, um, obviously Maxwell's been to a party and he's come home drunk, and we're gonna see where that takes.
Right. Um, the one thing I would like to add um, is after Niles finishes the fantasy, Fran makes the comment, "Oh, I just love playing this game,"
Yeah.
as if
Mhm.
it's something they've done before.
Yes. And I had that. I had a very scribbly note that I couldn't decipher as I was going through, and looking back, that is my note. So thank you.
Yeah,
for
no worries.
Yeah. Anyway.
Mhm. Debbie, you want to take us to the dining room?
I would love to. So now it is the next morning and it's breakfast time, and Maxwell looks visibly disheveled. He's clearly hungover. The kids are going about their like normal breakfast routine, but we're seeing the almost traumatic effect it's having on Maxwell in that, um, you know, Brighton is pouring milk into his cereal, and you hear the little popping of almost like pop rocks, right, in the cereal with the milk
The
touching each
snap,
individual.
crackle, and pop.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
then we see Maggie is buttering toast, and we're hearing the scratching sound of the knife on the dry bread. And then we see Gracie is and we hear, I should say, and we hear and see Gracie mixing chocolate syrup into milk, and it's making a clanging sound as she stirs. And poor Maxwell, he's just like visibly like shocked, or I want to say shell shocked, and like pained by this. And then in walks Fran. He's like, "No." And she does her usual thing. "Good morning, everyone." And she's in her usual bathrobe. Um, and as she's coming in, Gracie goes to Maxwell and asks, "Dad, are you sick?" And he's like, "No, I'm feeling fine, Margaret." And Fran corrects him, "That's Gracie." And Maxwell's clearly confused. "Oh, when did we have her?" And Fran says to him, "Never mind when we had her. When can we start making another one?" And Niles steps in saying, "Miss Fine, leave him alone. He's in a very vulnerable state." And something catches Maxwell's eye, and he says, "Niles, isn't that my watch?" And Niles says, "Oh, yes, sir. I love it." or something like that.
Yeah, like, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I love it. And I think that's pretty much the scene. Do either of you want to add anything?
No, you got it.
No?
All right.
Yeah.
Miranda, would you like to take us into the living room then?
Okay, so I'm just gonna like have to focus my mind here because I'm not as good at remembering all these details as you guys. So this is the part where Maxwell's looking does he start on the couch and then Niles comes over with the
So
drink?
it starts a little before that. So like Maxwell and Fran are walking into the living room from, upstage, the back.
Okay, and that's when he sees the newspaper, right?
It's before that. So
Okay.
that's a little bit later in the scene. So like how about I help out until we get to the point with the newspaper. Okay. So Maxwell and Fran are walking into the living room. Fran's sort of following him and she's kind of chastising him, saying, I hope last night was worth this morning. You really shouldn't drink like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he basically starts talking about how bad the party was, right?
So even before that, he says to her, Miss Fine, you're a beautiful woman. Do you find me attractive? And Fran's like, on the other hand, a little booze is good for the heart. And then he starts talking about the party. So if you want to pick up here, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So then he basically is like, there are all these beautiful women and nobody was talking to me, as kind of his excuse for why he got so drunk. And Fran looks down at him and is like, maybe that's the problem. And you think that it's like a joke about maybe like weight. And he's like, kind of what? And then she's like, no, your wedding ring. And she basically is like, you're not no woman's going to hit on you because you're wearing a wedding ring. And I think he starts talking about how his wedding ring reminds him of his deceased wife.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think she starts talking about taxes.
Yes.
So she's like, when you're filling out your taxes, are you an S or an M? Which was kind of funny. And he's like, no, like I'm an S. And she's like, well, you've told the IRS, so now you should start admitting it like to everybody else into the world. And then he's like, well, I want to be an M again. And she's like, well, I want to be an M too, but you can't be an M before you're an S. And it was just kind of a funny conversation where they were talking about that. And then I think Niles comes in at that point.
Yes.
And brings over what is probably some horrifying, revolting hangover cure.
Yes.
It looked very red. It's probably like tomato juice and a raw egg or something.
Oh, that sounds awful.
And then Mr. Sheffield starts to drink it and he's like, oh no, I think he says like, I can't handle anything this revolting this early in the morning.
Right.
And then Miss Babcock walks in from the other end of the room. So then Niles goes over to her and is like, Miss Babcock, you need to leave and come back in an hour.
Yes. Yep.
And then I think then Maxwell comes by Niles and he's like, I can't handle this drink. And then Niles is like, oh, I forgot to add the hair of the dog. And then he as he's walking by Miss Babcock, he takes a hair out, pulls a hair out, and then mimes, I think, sticking it in the drink.
Yep.
And Miss Babcock is not amused.
No.
Would you be?
No. But I think Mr. Sheffield's actually kind of oblivious at this point because he's still a little
inebriated.
Yeah, hungover. And then I think it's Cece's bringing in the newspaper, right?
Right.
Yep.
And then she's mentioning that Andrew Lloyd Webber is in the crossword. And so then Mr. Sheffield is like, why is Andrew Lloyd Webber in the New York Times crossword puzzle, but I'm not in the New York Times crossword puzzle. And I think it's Mr. Sheffield who brings up that he's produced more plays than Andrew Lloyd Webber. And then Miss Fine kind of makes the I don't think it's entirely clear if she means this to be malicious or not, but she's like, well, your plays are better because you can always get tickets to them.
Mhm.
whereas you can't get tickets to any Andrew Lloyd Webber play.
Right, because Andrew Lloyd Webber's plays are sold out for months.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which again, not entirely clear if she was meaning that as an insult or not.
I think it is that she was like legitimately trying to be helpful. Like, your plays are better because I can go and see them. Like, people can go and see them. And then she realizes that that's probably an indication that they aren't better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of a backhanded compliment.
Yeah. And then I think at that point is when Cece suggests, or sorry, Ms. Babcock suggests that he should hire a publicist.
Mhm.
And then Maxwell is like, "Oh, I don't need a publicist," and then Miss Babcock is like, "Oh, I know just the person. It's Sydney Mercer," and she makes some comment, I think, about kind of them being very good, and I think at that point, I don't think he agrees. He doesn't agree to even see or hire them per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah, because he believes self-promotion is, and I didn't have the exact word, but like
Tacky.
tacky. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think if somebody picks me up, I don't remember exactly if it's how that scene ends.
Yeah. Well, Fran just jumps in that if he gets a publicist, he should look into the one that Hugh Grant's hooker has.
Oh, yes.
Pretty classy.
Yes.
Yes. Which is not a reference I understood, but I'm
We'll get there. I looked it up.
Yeah. And that's how I'm pretty sure that's how it ends on, is Fran jumping in with that Hugh Grant's hooker line.
Who's coming off really classy right now.
Yeah.
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 I have just a couple things, if you don't mind me
Go
adding.
ahead.
Sure.
So I guess in the first part of the scene when Fran and Maxwell are talking, and yes, Maxwell complains that not one woman spoke to him the entire evening. They all avoided me like the plague. And when he's sitting, because by that point he's sitting in the chair and Fran points. I don't think she's pointing at his waist. I think he thought she was pointing at his genitals, which explains his reaction of, "I beg your pardon?" Because like he had his hands clasped over his lap. And so she was clearly, like, in her mind, she was clearly pointing at his hand, but he thought she was pointing at, shall we say, his manhood.
Oh, yeah. See, I thought she was pointing at his, I thought it was a gut reference, but clearly I don't have a dirty enough mind. So
That's fine. I mean, this is something Bernadette and I talk about with pretty much every episode. We're like, oh, and there's a reference that's dirty that we wouldn't have gotten as children when we watched the show originally.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, so like, you're right that he says that, wearing this ring helps me remember my wife. And Fran tells him, "You're never going to forget her. Just look at Maggie's smile or Gracie's eyes or Brighton's. Did your wife take any trips?" Because like apparently there's nothing about Brighton that looks like him or Sarah. And then the whole like taxes thing. The conclusion of that is, Maxwell says, "But I want to be an M again," and Fran says, "I want to be an M too, but first you got to make an S out of yourself." So that's
Yep.
I think that's all I wanted to add. Bernadette, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
All right. Would you like to then take us into, I believe, the living room?
Yes. So we're at a different point in time, but still in the living room at the Sheffield residence. Fran is on the couch. She has a knife in one hand. She's doing something. Gracie comes in and asks her what she's doing. And Fran explains that Weight Watchers is very strict. You're only allowed one cookie. And that's when we see what she's been doing. She's basically just gutted all of these Oreo cookies so that she could take all of the fillings and put it onto one cookie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's a substantial.
It's like 4 inches.
It's a mountain of Oreo
Yeah,
cream.
it did not look like it would actually be pleasant to eat.
I don't know how you'd even get that like in your mouth. Like you couldn't put a cookie on top to make it a full Oreo. You'd have to like kind of go top down, I would think. I don't know. Anyway, so at this point, we see that Miss Babcock is there, Cece. No, sorry, she's not. There's the doorbell. Niles is there. We open the door and we meet Sydney Mercer. But unlike what Cece had led us to believe that it's an old, man, in walks a young, beautiful woman, who's like wearing like a nice dress and everything. And then we basically have a little argument between Fran and Niles about who's going to go get Miss Babcock. Um, Fran's like, I'm going to go, but then Niles is like, no, it's the butler's job. And he's so gleeful. He goes. And, Sydney Mercer walks in a bit more. She and Fran are chatting, and Sydney asks Fran if she's Mrs. Sheffield, and she's like, no, no, no. I just live with him, run his life, and watch his kids. And then she kind of has like that like look of realization, like, that kind of sounds like a wife.
Right.
But she explains, no, she's the nanny. Meanwhile, Niles pushes Cece into the room, and Cece's just kind of like, what's all the rush? And they introduce her, and at first Cece thinks this is a joke. She's like, no, Sydney Mercer, he's a fat old womanizing geezer. And this Sydney Mercer's like, he's my father. And she goes, and funny. So funny, like trying to cover for that. And anyway, so they're gonna go introduce Sydney to Mr. Maxwell, Maxwell Sheffield, and we're all sorry he's kept you. It's a line that I'm trying to put into context.
So
Debbie, you wanna help me
yes,
out?
happy to do so. So after the whole funny, I love that guy from Cece, Niles turns to Sydney and says, Mr. Sheffield, sorry, he's kept you. And so he like directs her to start walking towards the office, and then Fran follows. And as Cece passes Niles, Niles says to her, we're all sorry he's kept you.
Yep. Classic Niles Cece kind of exchange.
Yes.
Do either of you have anything you want to add to that scene?
I do not.
Nope.
Okay. So Debbie, you want to take us to the office?
I would love to. So now we're in the office, and Fran, Maxwell, Cece, Niles, and Sydney are all in the room, and Sydney's sort of doing her pitch, if you will. Maxwell, you are a publicist's dream. You're devastatingly handsome, sexy, and incredibly debonair. To which Maxwell giggles.
Yep.
Yep.
A true giggle.
Yeah, it's like an embarrassed, like sort of infatuated, like
yeah,
it's like it's very juvenile.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran kind of makes a snarky comment. Wait, she hasn't even seen him do his Rod Stewart yet. Referencing back to his Rod Stewart impersonation from scene 1. And so Sydney continues, your only problem is that you have kept yourself a secret. And Maxwell jumps at this. Yes, I'm a secret. I was just telling everyone I'm a secret, which is sort of like it's night and day compared to how he was in scene 2 or scene 3. And so she, the Niles and Cece and Fran unenthusiastically agree, yes, he's a secret. What a secret.
He's such a secret.
Exactly. It's like, anyway, I think everyone except for maybe Maxwell and Sydney are a little uncomfortable. And Sydney continues, oh, Max, we're going to have so much fun together. Just put yourself in my hands. And that's when Cece has clearly had enough. Whoa. And she like leans over. Before Maxwell puts anything in your hands, he must discuss it with his business partner. We make all our important decisions together. And she has like put her arm around his shoulders, which is why she's like leaned down over the desk. And Maxwell, without missing a beat, without giving her any attention, you're hired. Cece doesn't take this too well, and she whines, Maxwell, I want a man. And Niles comments to Fran, the last one deflated when she nibbled his ear. And Maxwell comments about how, and just this morning I was so recalcitrant, like he's had a total change of heart. And Fran's like, oh, well, eggs always do that to him. And everyone kind of looks at her, realizing like she's the odd duck out. And so Maxwell asks her, what are you doing? Like, why are you here? And she's like, I don't know. Everyone was just, walking this way. And so she like puts down her like teacup and cake and, skedaddles. Do either of you want to add anything?
No.
No? Yeah.
All right. Miranda, would you like to take us back to the living room?
Okay, so there's an implication, I think, that some time has passed.
Yes.
And now Fran is sitting down and she is exclaiming, oh, look, Sydney got Mr. Sheffield in People magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's Cece who's behind her. I think,
yes.
Yeah. And says, oh, on the worst dress list.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Miss Fine says something like only the best people, or like only the most interesting people, or she says something.
Hippest and trendiest.
Yeah. And then is there a little more time lapse before Maxwell comes in?
So there's a little bit more discussion. So Fran comments about how they got Marsha Clark on the best dressed, case closed. And Fran's studying the People magazine. She's like, who is that cheap floozy squeezing into the picture behind him?
Yep. And then she's like, oh, it's me.
I'm in People magazine. And then Cece also is reading, I think it's a paper. And she's quoting Liz Smith about how Broadway producer Maxwell Sheffield has hired the young, vivacious Sydney Mercer to promote him. And Cece, needless to say, is still unhappy about this decision. She comments, promote my ass. And Niles comes in and says, all right, but we'll need a 2-page spread.
And then Maxwell walks in.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So this is when Maxwell walks in wearing what has to be just so many bad decisions. It's like a 50s greaser look, kind of.
Yes.
He's wearing frayed like jeans, like acid wash jeans with a lot of holes, and like a white t-shirt and a leather jacket, and like his hair is slicked back, and it just is not a good look. But anyway, so he comes in and Sydney's right behind him, also wearing a choice. It's like a satin, like a pink satin suit.
Yes.
And so they walk in, and I think like Miss Fine and Niles and Cece are kind of like, what?
Because he's kind of swaggering, right?
Yeah, he kind of like he's definitely feeling himself, and then he's
people.
Yeah, and then I think they mentioned that did they just see him on like a talk show?
Yeah, so he asks, did anyone see me on Ricky Lake?
Yeah. And did anybody respond, or did they say, yeah?
Fran said, oh, you looked gorgeous. And oh, that B. Arthur was making such eyes for you.
And then I think he turns and talks to Sydney, and then it kisses her on the lips at one point, like when they're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, is that when he mentions going to the Rainbow Room as like a celebration?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, so he mentions going to the Rainbow Room, and kind of asks, and Miss Fran is like, I'm free. And then kind of like Mr. Sheffield kind of looks at her, and she's like, to watch the children.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's when he turns and walks up the stairs, and so Fran and Cece and Niles are all watching him. Oh, and okay, he asks him about his suits. Niles asks him about his suits and says something like, "Oh, are you going to be needing these, or you want your Brooks Brothers suits?" And he kind of makes Maxwell some offhanded comment, and then Niles is like, "Yeah, I'll just take those. Like, they're going to be mine now."
I'll make all the alterations. I mean, arrangements.
Yes. So and then Mr. Sheffield's walking up the stairs and Niles turns to like Cece and was fine and is like, do you notice he has holes in his jeans? And then they both turn and they're like 12
Mhm.
Yeah,
because they've clearly counted how many
Yep. They're because
correct.
they're both like kind of forlorn watching
yes
go up the stairs
stairs.
because like basically so after the beat Arthur comment, I think Brighton briefly makes an appearance and says that Maxwell, oh look, it's the last Baldwin brother, Pappy.
Right.
Uh, and then that's when Maxwell's kind of like he's facing away from the others. He's kind of at that little circular table that often has floral arrangements. And he says, darling, what do you think about the Rainbow Room? Dinner, dancing? Are you free tonight? As a bird, says Fran. And that's when he kind of like looks and she's like, to watch the kids. And then basically he and Sydney like make plans for 8 and then they do that little kiss. Um, and again, so Sydney leaves and then Cece and Fran kind of just forlornly watch Maxwell go up the stairs. And just a quick note, the Brooke brothers things is in the next scene.
Oh,
But
I'm sorry. I
it's
I
okay.
got in.
It's okay. It's similar because we're gonna be in the living room still. Debbie, did you want to add anything?
I did not.
Okay. So we are again in the living room, and again, time has passed. Niles comes down and informs Fran that, he was able to talk Maxwell out of the leather pants, but then he spent the next hour getting him out. And Fran kind of like just like in terms of it took you an hour to get a man out of his pants. Next time, use a little Chanel number 5 in a tube top.
Right.
And and Niles is like, our little boy is beginning to noticing girls. And Fran kind of again kind of is dismissive. Oh, he's scared like a timid little puppy. But then he walks down and he's like, dressed up and she goes, woof. Um, and his left hand is in his pocket when she
Yes.
says, something looks different about you. You took off your wedding ring. And he's like, my hand's in my pocket. Like, how could you tell that? And she explains she can spot a wedding ring a mile away. And she kind of goes to the door because there's little glass panels you can look out. She's like, there's one, and there, and what the hell am I doing in here? Um, and that's when I think Maxwell again is kind of feeling himself in the style. And that's when Niles kind of takes takes the opportunity to ask about the Brooks brothers, like, oh, should I, get rid of or like, I think Maxwell kind of brings it up too.
Yeah, Maxwell basically is like, get rid of those for me, will you,
Yeah,
Niles?
and that's when Niles says, I'll make the alterations. I mean, arrangements.
Right.
Um, and again, let me see here.
Well, just while you're checking your notes,
Mhm.
the one thing I want to interject just to make sure we're clear, when Fran's talking about how she was able to see that Maxwell wasn't wearing a wedding ring, she says she could spot a man without a wedding ring
Yes,
a mile away, which is why it makes more sense for her to be like, there's one, there's one, there's one. What the hell am I doing in here? Because if
yes.
they're all wearing rings, she doesn't care.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. And Maxwell's talking to Fran and is like, you're right. I was hiding behind my wedding ring. And he admits he was terrified of getting hurt, but now, he thinks he's met the one. And he
Yep.
kisses Fran on the forehead and leaves. And
Mhm.
and again, like Fran's kind of dejected and she walks over to the staircase and sits down, kind of with her legs a bit parted or something.
Mhm.
And Niles comes over to kind of talk with her, like, "Oh, Miss Fine, are you concerned about your position?" And she like crosses her legs. Niles, you dog. Again, something like we would not catch as children.
Correct.
He's like, "No, no, no, in the household." And she's like, "Oh, like I'm worried that he might have a wife who, comes and, gets the kids ready for school and makes them lunch and all that. I don't do that. So, but anyway, Niles excuses himself to go make some room in the closet because he needs some shirts to go with his new suits. So Fran is still down there. The doorbell rings and she opens the door and it's Sydney. And um, and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing here? Like, Mr. Sheffield's already left." And it turns out Sydney thought that they were going to meet at the Sheffield home. And Fran like immediately goes into like, "Well, you better hurry. If he eats too late, he gets terrible indigestion, and you just want to give him 2 Mylanta gel coat caps. Here it is." And then she starts going into, "I wish you all the happiness in the world." And she's kind of like sad about it. And Sydney's just very confused, like, "What are you talking about?" And then Fran goes into trying to give herself a pitch for like in the future if they get married. All I'm asking for is $500 a week plus dental. And Sydney's like, "Whoa, you're way off. Fine, $350 and a water pick."
Right.
And Sydney explains at that point, "No, I'm not interested in him in that way." And Fran kind of gets offended on his behalf. She goes, "What? Is he not good enough for you?" And Sydney explains, "No, it's his gender." And Fran's like, "No, no, I accidentally saw him in the shower once. There's nothing wrong with his gender." And then so Sydney has to like very clearly say, "Fran, I'm gay." And Fran goes, "Oh, thank God," and hugs her. And then the hug continues, and Fran's eyes get wide, and she drops her, hands to her side, and she says, "I'm letting go, and you're not. Why?"
Right.
And Sydney's like, "Well, aren't you gay?" And Fran's like, "What?" Like, "What gave you that impression?" "Well, you're over 30, never married, no man in your life." "Oh, I'm not gay, just pathetic." And then Sydney's like, "Too bad. I would have asked you out." And Fran's like, "Ugh, just my luck, like a gorgeous professional, at, asks would ask me out, but it's a woman." And then she pauses a second, and then she kind of turns and looks at her. "You're not Jewish, are you?" And she's like, "Oh, unfortunately not." And Fran says, "We were this close to making my mother happy." Um, but then she starts kind of hitting like the kind of like soft slapping with both hands on the upper arm kind of thing. "But how could you do this to him?" And as she's slapping her, she's like, "You're not enjoying this, are you?" Um, and Sydney's like, kind of rolls that off, but she's like, "They were just business lunches. I talked, he listened. Like, does that mean he wants to have sex?" "Yes, that's why they talk. That's why they buy you meals. That's why they say you like your voice. It's not too nasal." And she, Fran has another one of those self-reflection moments. Um, and then she's like, "Mr. Sheffield, he's poor Mr. Sheffield. He's at the Rainbow Room, heart on his sleeve, vulnerable, ready to make a commitment to a woman." And she gets like that look in her eye. She runs off. And then we have a very quick transition scene where she is obviously changed and she's hailing a taxi. Do you guys have anything to add to that scene?
I do not.
No, nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Debbie, you want to take us after Fran's?
Sure. So as Bernadette mentioned, we see Fran hailing a taxi, and then we have this very short scene, and I can do more than just this if you want me to, where Maxwell is like waiting before an elevator, then getting on an elevator, and we hear Fran from off screen shouting, "Hold the elevator, hold the elevator." And she like runs into the elevator, catches Maxwell, and he's like, what are you doing here?" And she's like, "Oh, well, my eye doctor's in this building." And he looks at her, "And you're dressed like that?" And she looks down. "Would you look at what I put on? Thank God he could take me on Saturday night." I kind of think this is one of those places where we should talk about what she's wearing.
Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah.
So she's not in what she was wearing when talking to Sydney. Now she's in a floor length pink dress with a pink jacket over it. It has sort of like a mermaid, maybe a trumpet cut, so it kind of flares a little bit at the bottom, but it's like a magenta, bright pink. And she has a like silver and sort of jeweled necklace, like kind of like a choker, but a little bit lower down on like right at her clavicle. Yeah,
Definitely not something you'd wear to the dentist.
or eye doctor or
No,
anybody else. Yeah.
no, yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Um,
eye doctor. Yeah.
So yeah, Miranda, would you like to take over, or would you like me to do some of the scene?
I can take over. I also probably will not get all of the great. There were so many great one-liners in this elevator scene.
Yes.
So you can start a little bit because it was like that whole like the next couple minutes are just like this. You could like just really highlights what an amazing comedic actress I think Fran Drescher is.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that this scene and the next one are just so iconic, and they're so representative of the writing on this show.
Yeah.
So we're now in the elevator, the doors have closed, and Fran turns to Maxwell and says, "What do you think when a woman's gorgeous, in her 30s, and never been married?" And Maxwell says, "Miss Fine, you'll meet someone." And she's like, "Oh no, not me. I was talking about, oh, you think I'm gorgeous?" And he's like, "What's your point?" She's like, "Never mind. How long have you thought I was gorgeous?" And he's like, "Miss Fine, I have a date with Sydney." And she's like, "Oh, no, you don't. She's gay. Let's focus on me." "What did you say?" "I said, let's focus on me." Um, and, as they're having this, like right after that part of the conversation, something is not quite right with the elevator. Would you like to take over, Miranda?
Sure. Okay. So it all blacks out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not seeing anything. And so there's the usual like, oh no, we're stuck in an elevator. And then I think Mr. Sheffield goes something like, why are you touching like that?
What are
What are
you
you
doing?
doing?
What are you doing? And Fran's like, I'm trying to find the emergency phone. And Mr. Sheffield's like, that's not the emergency phone.
Yep, that's not it.
And he has
And
this like uncomfortable tone of voice, like very rigid, like, "That's
yeah.
not it."
And she's like, I guess I better stop putting my mouth near it or something, or stop talking into it.
Miranda, you're making it even dirtier than it was.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was definitely implying something.
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't get as a child. I'll
No,
just say that.
no. Anyway, and then the lights come back on in the scene, and I have to say, Fran is looking a little disheveled. So, um, so they're I think they're chatting, and then I think I got the impression that Fran really didn't mind being trapped in the elevator with Mr. Sheffield until he starts talking about his reservation in the Rainbow Room, and
Mm-hmm.
he's talking about the chilled champagne, and then he says and cracked crab.
Mm-hmm.
So and then you kind of see her eyes light up, and she's like, "Oh, we're getting out of here."
Right.
So then it kind of cuts, and you have the implication that he's boosted her up, and so she's kind of that her head sticking out of the emergency hatch on the top of the elevator, and she says, "Oh, I can see it," and then she says, "But I can also see like a rat,"
Mm-hmm.
and so she starts kind of freaking out, and Mr. Sheffield's, and then it kind of cuts back inside, and you see that I think at this point he's not even really holding her up, but her
Mhm.
feet look like they were standing on his shoulders, and he's kind of getting kind of flustered because her feet are kind of moving around like his face, um and he says, Miss Fine is probably more scared of you than you are of it. And then she says, oh no, it's looking at my hair and trying to decide if it's a 1 bedroom or a 2,
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was so funny. Anyway, so then I forget if like something happens
Yeah.
or not, but then I think there's this moment where he's like, do you want the good news or the bad news?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
and
There's
he's
good news,
basically
bad news. Yeah.
there's good news, bad news. I don't even remember what the good news is, but he's like, the bad news is you're stuck.
Yeah. So he says the bad news is you're stuck, and she's like, "Well, then what's the good news?" And he's like, "You've got your money's worth with this thigh master." I guess he's kind of
Oh,
touching her leg at this point.
yes. Another kind of dirty thing I forgot.
Yep.
And then you see it cut her face, and she's kind of like, "Oh, thank you."
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so at this point, I might have you take it over, Debbie, because they have this like really nice banter with
Okay.
her, and then there's this stuff going on with her feet too.
Yeah.
And I think I was so focused on the visual of her feet that I didn't pick up as much on what you were saying.
Okay. So before we go a little further, I'm going to take us just a couple steps back to before she like gets lifted up, just so we don't have to go back further. Um, you know, so when they're in the elevator, Maxwell's sort of lamenting that he, can't believe Sydney's gay. Oh, what an idiot I've made of myself. Oh, wait, what am I saying? She doesn't know how I feel about her. And Fran's like, across the elevator looking kind of near the buttons. And she makes the comment, oh, don't be so sure. Women have a sixth sense. And he's like, you told her. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, my one regret is that this elevator cable might snap before I get my hands around your neck.
Yep.
And she's like, that's your one regret, not the revival of Fiddler starring Lyle Wagner. And then she's like, okay, let's just like calm
It's
down.
fine.
Yeah. Like, let's calm down. Let's relax. Sit down. Let's take it easy. Eventually someone will come and get us out of here. And so they sit down and they're like sitting like again with their backs against the like wall of the elevator. And that's when Maxwell says, oh, what a waste. Upstairs, I have an intimate table for two, a violinist, champagne chilling on ice, cracked crab. And Fran's like, that we'll make a break for it. Let me take this off. And so she takes off her jacket. And that's when she puts her head through the emergency hatch. But so then picking up where you left off, so Fran is stuck and she's whining and she makes, I don't remember exactly what she says, but then she says, oh my God. And Max was like, what, another rat? And she's like, worse. There's an echo in here and I just heard my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we hear faintly of some music, and she comments on how the band is beginning to play. Oh, I love this song. And she's like moving her feet around. You want to dance? And she like pokes his face with her toe. And he says to her, no, Miss Fine, I'd rather sit this one out. Maybe I should sit out the next 5 years too. Then I won't have to feel this way again. And she doesn't like that as an answer. And she tells him, take it from me, you're a real catch. And she's like moved her feet so they're like 1 foot on each side of his face. And she's like stroking his cheek with her foot. You're a real catch. It's like she's trying to be calming, soothing, etc., warm with her feet. And she says to him, when the right woman comes along, believe me, you'll know it. And he says, thank you, Miss Fine. And he's looking a little uncomfortable by the fact that he's being petted by her feet.
Yeah.
And he says, thank you, Miss Fine, but I'm afraid I wouldn't know the right woman for me if she fell out of the sky. And at that moment we hear, oop, and she falls.
Yep.
And it was like it's almost like he's trying to like get away from it, but she keeps entrapping him with her.
Yeah.
Which is quite marvelous since she probably can't see him. And so she's like spatially feeling for him with just her feet.
Oh, I felt so bad for the actor. That would be super uncomfortable.
Just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing he didn't have a foot phobia.
Yeah. Yep. And
Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
Nope. You got it. I guess before we jump into the shtick, though, any kind of overarching things that we want to talk about?
So I was actually kind of surprised how um I guess how chill like the coming out part was, or like the Sydney realization thing.
Mhm.
Like, because this is 1995, and I guess like you would have already had like Ellen, I think was before that. So
I thought
so
she
I,
was later 90s.
oh, maybe she was later 90s.
Oh.
So I kind of appreciated that like it was just like really chill. And like the major issue wasn't like her being gay, it was that she didn't want to date Mr. Sheffield
Right.
Mhm.
more so.
Mhm.
Um and I also liked the bit where Fran was talking, or was kind of like, oh, we could have made like, oh, we almost missed making my mother happy, basically, because it's like her impression was, oh, my mom would have been happy if I had brought home a professional,
Mhm.
good-looking Jew, and it didn't, like, she wouldn't have cared, basically, that it was a woman. So I was like, oh, okay, this is actually a pretty, I think, pretty positive.
Mhm. Well,
Um,
did you have any thoughts about when they're hugging and Fran kind of gets that look in her eyes, or like later in the scene where she's kind of like slapping her and asking her if she's enjoying it?
yeah, I mean, was that the greatest? No. Um,
Mhm.
but I think it was like, I think the fact that like, I don't know, I think the hug part, I think didn't really bother me as much, because I think they're at that point they're trying to make the point that like this woman's interested in Fran, and Fran has kind of just given her the impression that she's also interested, because she was like, "Oh, thank goodness," right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um and then I think when Fran kind of indicated she was uncomfortable, then it stopped. So I was like, that didn't really bother me. The slapping part, I do have to say, was a little weird.
Mhm.
Like the like, first of all, don't slap this random person you barely know, but that's not, I mean,
Mhm.
that's a whole other thing.
Well, in
Yeah.
fairness, all of the female members of the Fine family tend to speak with their hands in that fashion.
Yes, yes, that's
So
that's not out of the ordinary for this show.
correct.
Um, but the like, oh, are you like it like liking this? It's like that, yeah. That was a little weird. I'll give that. But I think the
Fair.
rest was like I said, I was kind of surprised
Mhm.
how nonchalant that aspect of it was.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I was kind of like, considering the title of the episode, I thought it was gonna play a bigger role in a sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But but yeah, no, speaking of that scene though too, when she's like, you're over 30, never been married, no man in your life. Oh, I'm not gay, just pathetic. I was like, ouch. I guess I'm pathetic. But yeah, then we can talk about that more. But yeah, anything else kind of overall before we get into the shticks?
I'm ready to jump into the shticks if you guys are.
Okay.
I just have one comment. I
Okay.
Maybe the 90s were a very different time, but it's like the thought of a successful Broadway producer not already having a publicist makes no sense.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Fair. Um, fair. We'll see. He gets some publicity in later episodes on the series, which in some cases a publicist might have been helpful for. So,
Mm-hmm.
I guess we should start with our favorite and not so favorite fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I guess why don't we start with the outfits we've discussed, and start with Maxwell's, shall we say, redesign with the 12 pulled pants, the slicked back hair, the leather jacket.
Mm-hmm.
I was personally not a fan.
Nope.
Yeah.
It was like he was trying too hard. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It did not look the actor did a very good job of, I think, portraying somebody who thought they looked cool but definitely didn't look cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it seemed kind of like a midlife crisis kind of outfit, if, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. She probably wasn't a very good publicist if that's the outfit she was putting him in for.
Well, she's definitely not a stylist, right?
No.
Yeah.
Uh, but did you guys like what he wore then to the rainbow room? Well, to the elevator going to the rainbow room.
Yeah, I actually thought that was a very nice look. So Niles, I guess, can be the stylist.
Yes. Even though he's, absconded with all of his suits. But
Yeah.
Don't worry, they're back next week.
well, I thought too, kind of just in terms of the actor as well, he did a great job of like conveying like a sense of like confidence in it. Um,
Yeah.
as he was wearing it, like to go against the timid puppy thing that Fran was saying he would be. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I definitely
Did
like the rainbow room outfit better than the holy jeans, but I still didn't like what he did with his hair. The slicking it back, I'm not a fan.
you?
Mm.
Mhm.
What about? Oh, sorry, Bernadette, go ahead.
I was gonna say like Fran's outfit to the elevator of the rainbow room.
That's exactly where I was going to. I love the color. The cut is fine. I didn't care for the jacket.
Interesting. I wasn't really a fan of the outfit in general. Um,
Yeah. It was very 90s. The
Mhm.
cut, the jacket had some serious shoulder pads going on,
Yes.
as do all of her jackets. Um, but yeah, I thought the dress was actually pretty nice. Not a color I personally would wear. Um, but it was cut very well. Um, so she actually, I think that the one like full length shot we get where she's waiting for the taxi, I think she actually looks pretty good.
Yeah. And that actually, then she doesn't even have the jacket on. She has it
Yeah.
like over her arm. The other time we see the full length of the dress is when she and Maxwell are in the elevator before the elevator doors close. And then she's wearing the jacket. I just don't like the jacket.
And it's kind of like asymmetric, like it's not buttoned or clasped in the middle, right?
Yeah.
It's
So
kind
that
of
was,
almost wrapped in
it's
a
like,
way.
like it has like a hidden button, if you will, like on the inside
hmm
on one side, and then it must be on the other side, but we don't see the other side.
hmm Um, so I actually have something I liked from Cece.
Really? Which
Yeah.
outfit?
Well, not the entire outfit. I liked her, and I don't know exactly how to describe the color because it wasn't quite turquoise, but it's like whenever she's wearing that silk like long sleeve top.
The button down in like
Yeah.
the
hmm
first scene we see her.
And then yeah, and then personally I would have liked a shorter skirt because her skirt's like floor length,
Hmm.
so like more by the knees. But I liked actually the shirt.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like it when Cece is dressed in a color instead of just like black or I mean red. I mean red is a color, but I like when she's wearing something I don't want to say like a little softer, I guess.
hmm
What did you think of her outfit when we meet Sydney Mercer? So she's wearing like a brown turtleneck and I think it's brown. It could be black or
I think it's
gray.
brown. I
The
think it's
floor
brown.
length skirt.
Oh, yeah, because like it almost like makes her like blend in with the background in a sense, or like
Yeah,
really, like mute her
it
in
makes
a
her
way.
look matronly.
hmm
Yeah.
I think it
I
was like to emphasize the difference to some extent.
Yeah, this is not a CC thing, but did anybody else kind of get the vibe that when like the outfit that Sydney Mercer was wearing when they came in the first time and the outfit that Fran was wearing were actually cut very similarly. Like they weren't the same, like they didn't have the same colors, but it
hmm
was like a similar like shape
Silhouette. Yeah.
and silhouette.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Mhm.
Um,
We should talk about what Sydney was wearing when we first see her. Because I kind of wonder. I'll be transparent. I don't like what she's wearing. She's wearing like her dress. It's a dress, and it's like off the shoulders, and it has some like colored horizontal stripes on the top, and then it's like gray, and it's short, so it's like kind of in Fran's style. I just didn't think it was appropriate for a business meeting to meet, a potential client for the first time. Like, I think she could have dressed a little better.
I would agree with that, but I think for the plot point of it being like somebody who's supposed to be like very sexy and like attractive, like it makes sense that they put her in like a little more of a like a more Miss Fine type outfit.
Fair. I agree. Let's see, what other Bernadette, do you have any other outfits you want to talk about?
I mean, not particularly. I kind of did like Fran's first outfit when she catches Niles in the office.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, you want to go ahead? You want to describe it, Debbie?
So that's actually, spoiler, that's my favorite outfit she wore in this episode.
Okay.
So she's wearing like a black turtleneck, which we've seen her in innumerable times. And then she has a skirt that goes approximately to her knees, but it's not like her normal skirts. Like normally her skirts are very snug and very tight. And like they're form-fitting. This one is more like this one has a bit, yeah, it's more of an A-line. It has a bit more poof. And the skirt is black with like white sort of like crescents or commas. It's kind of hard to tell exactly what they are, but and then her hair is down, and anyway, yeah. And she's wearing black stockings and black heels.
Yeah, that was a nice skirt.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think one of my least favorite of her episode or her outfits this episode was the one that she has in the gay reveal scene, which was like the leopard print
I think
jacket
it's tiger print
or tiger print. Yeah. And then the black skirt where it's just a lot. I know a lot of her outfits are a lot.
Yeah.
But it was a lot.
Frankly, I also did not like that outfit, but I honestly wasn't sure if she was wearing a skirt or shorts. Either way, I didn't care for it.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that the jacket is like a velvety like fabric, which I think adds to its adds to why I don't like it. The only other outfit I think worth noting is what Fran's wearing when we do meet Sydney for the first time. She's wearing that red like scoop neck shirt with like the flowy sleeve, like the sleeves are like normal long sleeves up until about the wrist, and then they sort of poof out. So I kind of like the top. That's all. That's why I want to bring it up. All right. I'm out of fashion to talk about. Do either of you have any other fashion you want to favor?
I do not.
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
All right.
So then, notable New Yorkers.
There weren't as many this week as in some weeks past.
There were like spurts where
Yes.
you'd have conversation where there would be several name drops. But yeah. But
So
do we go ahead?
This is not a notable New Yorker, but I thought this was kind of interesting from like a modern perspective. Is I wonder how famous Andrew Lloyd Webber like was in 1995, because like now the idea of Andrew Lloyd Webber being like the answer to a New York Times crossword puzzle, it seems like, yeah, that makes sense. Like he's probably like, other than Lin-Manuel Miranda, he's probably the most famous Broadway like producer,
or at least who's still alive.
Yeah, not like Stephen Sondheim or sadly, pour one out for you, Sondheim. Or like some of the other Rodgers and Hammerstein or something, right?
Right.
But I wonder like if at that point, if he was at the same level of fame, or if that was something where it would have been like, oh, like it would have been surprising, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I would say he owes a significant amount of his fame to the Nanny. since
Yeah,
he's
I was
referenced
gonna
so
say.
often. It has nothing to do with, his many, many amazing shows like Cats or Phantom, Sunset Boulevard. No. It all has to do with the Nanny and his, ongoing rivalry with Maxwell Sheffield.
Well, I would be curious if only back from starting at the pilot episode we had kept track of how many times he's referenced versus Barbara Streisand.
The next time
quite
we
the
start
battle.
a podcast about the Nanny, we will do that. The next time.
I think those two are the most referenced individuals
Yes.
in the show.
Yes. I don't need to go and rewatch every episode to tell you, yes, that is correct. Because Barbara Streisand is referenced almost every episode, and Andrew Lloyd Webber is referenced at least every 5 episodes, and he plays a part, and we'll continue hearing his name throughout the series.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, but in the opening scene, we actually do pretty soon out of the gate have a reference to Hillary Clinton and Al Gore.
Yep.
Who talked about before. Obviously, when this episode aired, Bill Clinton was the president, so Hillary at that time was first lady. Al Gore was the vice president.
Yep. And let me tell you that joke would have rang very differently 3 years later.
Yeah.
Like Al Gore is not the joke they're gonna make about Hillary
Yep.
catching somebody in an office.
That's true. Yes. Then Fran is kind of lamenting how many doors, and she says it's kind of like laughing. Did you find info on that, Debbie?
I did not. I
okay.
must have missed that one.
Okay, let me do our handy dandy Google. So Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In is an American sketch comedy television program that ran for 140 episodes from January 22nd, 1968 to March 12th, 1973. And I'm assuming there's a lot of doors. Just gonna
put that out there.
I'm just gonna context.
And that's according to, I assume, our friends at Wikipedia?
Sure. It was the first search thing on Google.
Thank you, Google.
So yeah. Does anybody want to jump in? First of all, did any of you guys recognize what song was playing right before Fran opened her mouth to greet everybody good morning when Maxwell was super hungover?
I did not.
It's so I got spoiled because I watched things with closed captions.
Yes.
So it specifically said the Jaws.
Yes. Good job, Miranda.
Fair. Even before that, though, there are the references to Rod Stewart and his song "Do You Think I'm Sexy?"
Yes.
"Do You Think I'm Sexy" is, as I said, a song by Rod Stewart. It's from his album "Blondes Have More Fun," which was released in 1978. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Rod Stewart, he's actually Sir Roderick David Stewart, who is a British singer and songwriter who is known for a distinctive raspy voice. That's also according to our friends at Wikipedia. Continue.
Okay. Okay, so you said that you did look up Hugh Grant's hooker.
Yes.
Right?
So I believe it's a reference to Estella Marie Thompson, also known as Divine Brown, who was a former sex worker who caught the media attention and the attention of law enforcement in 1995 when Hugh Grant was caught receiving oral sex from her in his car. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. We've mentioned Weight Watchers before. Now, the big thing is that whenever Sydney Mercer walks in, there's kind of a reaction from the audience.
Yes.
I did not recognize her off the bat. Did either of you happen to
Okay,
recognize her?
So this is a real, well, I don't want to say deep cut, but I didn't initially recognize her, but I was like, her face looks really familiar. So I'm gonna IMDb look up this actress.
Mm-hmm.
So her daughter was one of the high profile victims / members of the Nexium cult.
What?
And that's where I saw her on the Nexium documentary on HBO. And I was like, that, like, anyway.
Wow. That's
So
impressive, Miranda.
it's
Yeah.
very random, but yes, but she, like, the woman, Catherine Oxenberg, shows up in the documentary about the cult, like talking about how terrible it was because like all these things they did to her daughter. But anyway, so that's why I recognized her, not I think because of her acting role.
Wow.
But-
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That makes my little blurb look far less interesting. Just for people who have not seen that or heard of the cult or any of that, she's an American actress who is known for a role she had on Dynasty. She's actually the daughter of Princess Elizabeth of Yugoslavia, which was the interesting thing I found. But again, way less interesting than the deep cut you just gave us, Miranda. Mine is courtesy of our friends at Wikipedia, who
Yeah.
also apparently have commented on the exact thing you brought up.
Yeah, but you know what's funny is that, like, according to our friends at Wikipedia, her dad is actually Jewish.
Oh, that's
course.
funny.
So yeah.
Called, yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so that's Catherine Oxenberg to our listeners. So she actually is, has some Jewish ancestry and is not, to our knowledge, gay. I mean, not according to Wikipedia. Who
Correct.
knows? But
No.
yeah, so
So this is going to be mean. I didn't think she did a great job with the acting.
well, okay. There was like an accent, right?
Yeah, she is British, I believe.
She was born in New York but raised in London.
Oh, okay.
And
Because it wasn't a straight British accent, I don't think.
yeah, it was kind of interesting because there were times when I thought that she was meant to be British, and there were other times where I was like, maybe she's not.
Mm.
But yeah, it was just interesting. I felt like, and I don't know, maybe she was uncomfortable with the role or whatever, but like compared to, I think just like kind of the fluidity and ease of like the other actors, she seemed very stilted to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. Um, yeah, I don't know. I can definitely say, I just, I was distracted trying to pinpoint her accent. Anyway.
Fair.
Okay, so she again is the audience has that reaction when she shows up. And then looking ahead, the next scene I don't think really had any references.
No.
Then we get the People magazine cover, best dress, worst dress list, and then they mention Marcia Clark.
An American author, television correspondent, and producer, and the prosecutor known for her role as lead prosecutor in the O.J. Simpson murder trial.
Mm-hmm.
That's according to our
And
friends at Wikipedia. Before you go too much further, though, there is also another reference in there.
yeah, Liz Smith.
Before that.
Oh.
So People magazine, between People magazine and Marcia Clark, Fran makes the comment, only the hippest and trendiest people end up on the worst dressed list.
Mhm.
That is a reference to Fran Drescher being on People's 10 worst dressed list in September 1995. And that's according to
Wow.
IMDb.
Wow.
I like it.
So
like it.
I felt like I needed to just throw that in there. Continue.
Yes. No, that's good because I wouldn't have known that. So is Liz Smith an actual?
Yeah, we've actually talked about her
That
previously.
seems like it. Yeah.
She was an American gossip columnist. She was known by the nickname of the Grand Dame of Dish. She wrote columns for papers such as Cosmo, Washington Post, New York Daily News. She worked with on television. She was on E, Fox, WNBC. She also worked with Newsday. Yeah, we've talked about her previously, and we'll definitely talk about her again.
And then Maxwell was on Ricky Lake.
So Ricky Lake was a daytime talk show which was hosted by Ricky Lake. It focused on sensational topics. It ran from September 1993 until May 2004. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
B. Arthur, I best know her from Golden Girls.
Yeah,
Yep.
she was an American actress and comedian who originally is from Brooklyn. She was best known for her roles of Dorothy Zbornak on The Golden Girls and Maude Finley in All in the Family and the show Maude.
Mhm.
That's according to our friends at Wikipedia, but I also knew that on my own.
Yeah. Good job.
Thank you.
The Baldwin brothers.
That's a reference to Alec, Daniel, William, and Stephen Baldwin. They're all members of the Baldwin family. They're performers. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Haven't we recently talked about the Rainbow Room?
We did, but I don't think it was that recently. So
Okay.
I grabbed probably the same blurb, and this is from RockefellerCenter.com. And I quote, "The original home of New York glamour and entertainment, a place where the food, the service, and the skyline all come together to create incomparable, unforgettable experiences." End quote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also had to Google the Rainbow Room and see if it was still there. I'm like, does this place still exist? And it does.
It does.
Hmm.
The Brooks Brothers.
Yep.
I grabbed from the Brooks Brothers webpage, and I quote, "Since 1818, Brooks Brothers has upheld traditions in craftsmanship that have defined over 200 years of American style, dressing 39 presidents along with industry leaders and cultural innovators."
Yeah. Well, not anymore, right? They declare bankruptcy, I think, right?
That I
Or
don't know, but they do have a webpage on which you can order clothing. So
yeah, or not bankruptcy, but they closed down a bunch of their brick and mortar stores, I believe.
that I believe. According to our friends at Wikipedia, the company was actually founded in Manhattan in, as we've already said, 1818. It's the oldest apparel brand in continuous operations in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So then there was the talk of the revival of Fiddler.
Fiddler, it's clearly a reference to Fiddler on the Roof, which we've talked about before.
And then Lyle Wagner.
He was an American actor, model, salesman, sculptor, and presenter, known, I think, most for his role on the Carol Burnett show.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to assume that he would have made a very bad Tevye.
My guess is he wasn't Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
so it would be harder for him to get to like relate to the material. But that's just my guess.
Yeah. Do you have any other references?
I did not.
How about you, Miranda? Anything we left out?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think we pretty much caught most of them.
Mm-hmm. So Yiddish cop.
We actually had a couple things here. So I'm going to start with the obvious, which everyone knows I'm about to say. Cracked crab is not kosher. Crabs are not kosher. They are trafe. So the fact that that's what gets her excited enough and like want to go rescue themselves, get themselves out of the elevator, it makes no sense. So you knew I was
Well,
going to say
I
that.
think it's been previously established that the Fine family does not follow strict kashrut.
They do not. They do not even pretend. But as we're watching the show with a more critical eye, that is something that is getting on my nerves. Because even I think a lot of Jews who even those who don't keep kosher, they will tend to eat more kosher style. I mean, I grew up in a kosher home, so like to me, the fact that anyway, I don't know why people want to eat crabs. Like I don't see food when I see a cute little crustacean walking by. But that's just me. I had two others. So in the first scene, you know, Niles asks Fran, like, "Didn't your father ever come home inebriated?" And she says, "No, we're Jewish. He came home gaseous." And so I think there are two references here. The first one is a reference to the fact that about 75% of Jews are lactose intolerant.
I didn't know that.
And actually, as I was digging into this, I found this great source on haaretz.com. And so I'm going to quote for them that 3/4 of all Jews cannot digest this milk sugar, so that's lactose, as compared to 90% of Asian Americans. Ashkenazi Jews also are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop Crohn's disease, an inflammatory disorder of the digestive tract. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, which also from the same source, which I did not know, and I'm going to again quote them, some 20% of Jews carry a gene that protects against alcoholism, with the variant more common in Sephardim than in Ashkenazim. So I did not know that, and I thought that was really interesting.
That is very interesting.
And then sort of kind of to the point before about how like the fact that Sydney was gay was like a non-issue, except for the fact that Maxwell was about to have his heart broken. That actually, I think, speaks to the Jewish community, particularly in the Reform community. According to reformjudaism.org, the women of Reform Judaism originally began calling for the decriminalization of homosexuality in 1965. And other Jewish organizations followed suit. There's also the Religious Action Center, which is the social justice, like, I guess, brain of the reform movement, has been at the forefront fighting for LGBTQ equality, you know, going back a very, very long time. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Obviously, oy vey in the title. We've talked about that. It's an exclamation. Like, it's usually oy vey. It's not usually a positive connotation. Yeah, did I miss any?
And that's partly why I was like, I thought it was interesting that that was the title of the episode, given how the subject, like how it's later handled, if that makes sense. But yeah. Okay. Yeah, I didn't see anything else. Did you see anything else, Miranda?
No, I did not.
So 90s nostalgia. There was a lot in terms of, generally speaking, again, the whole comment about you're over 30, never married, without a man in your life. You know, you must be gay. And Fran's like, no, I'm just pathetic. And that begs the question to some extent. Does that seem very dated to you? Is that a 90s thing? Nowadays, is it a regional thing? Like, how that kind of translates to you? Because I know just offhand, like, we've briefly talked before how, like, I grew up in the South and stuff, and a lot of people I know got married relatively young. And then you guys grew up more East Coast, right? And you guys have had a different experience, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was kind of joking that only one, well, not joking, I was just saying that only one of my friends from college is married, and spoiler, we're all over 30. Or I'm over 30, personally.
You mean
Me
you
and my
and
friends.
your college friends are
Me
over
and my
30?
college friends are over 30. I'm not trying to include anyone else on this on this podcast.
We appreciate that.
And so yeah, I think that even though I think it's not maybe true anymore, I do think it's still a very common stereotype, though. And I think that 30 is still seen as kind of this like benchmark for a lot of people. Like, that is the point at which you like should be married by, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up watching the Nanny, so that's clearly how my brain has been shaped.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing to kind of go along with this is, like, again, okay, the assumption is that if you've never been married was part of that, right? Over 30, never married, not a man in your life, you must be gay. Do you think now that, and hopefully still in the future, that there's gay marriage, would that be a different assessment? Like, or is that more kind of dated? Because obviously you could get married now if you're gay. So does that change anything?
Yeah, I do. I think that maybe the stereotype would be now less never married and more just, you never brought a man home kind of thing. Because I think that comes up a lot in popular culture, I think even in our day and age, right? our day and age. But like you see that in shows where it's like families will assume it's like, oh, well, you never had a boyfriend. Like, does that mean you're, you like women or vice versa?
Mm-hmm.
In the case of a man, like having not brought home a girlfriend. I think we still see that a lot in media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So then maybe the marriage piece of it, not necessarily. Because I think too, like we've all noticed, I think generally speaking, generationally, like people are getting married later these days, like just generally talking here. Obviously there can be regional differences as well.
Right. And also socioeconomic differences, because the
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
who are getting married now, it's a different group than the people who would get married a generation or two generations ago. Like
Mhm.
a generation or more ago, everyone got married. And now the people who are getting married are a much smaller segment of the population,
Mhm.
typically.
Yeah.
Other 90s nostalgia?
Well, that was, I think, the big one. More smaller ones. Did anyone notice Maxwell's tiny little cell phone?
Oh, I didn't.
No.
It was not a smartphone. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I
Was
was more preoccupied with the cordless phone that was ringing that
There.
both Niles and Fran were hesitant to pick up.
yeah.
Um, I maybe this is just me, but Gracie mixing her own chocolate milk seemed dated to me because you can just buy chocolate milk in the store,
Mm.
which I'm pretty sure you could also do in the 90s, but to me that just looked so like old fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that might just be a point of
Personal preference.
personal preference. Yeah. I like to mix my chocolate milk, but that's because I like to use fancy chocolate syrup because I'm a snob.
Oh, okay.
So
Fair. I'm gonna go with old cars. In particular, we saw an old taxi
Mm-hmm.
in this episode.
I think the whole idea of the dinner date is a little date like not going on a dinner date, but the fact that there would be a venue in New York City where there would be like dancing and music playing and also you could get a fancy dinner. Like I don't think that's a common thing anymore.
I think that's probably right.
Um and dressing up that much too for dinner as well, I think is maybe a little not common. Like Fran is wearing a full-length dress.
Yeah.
Yes. And that actually is an interesting point, which maybe I should have raised in favorite fashion, but compared to what Sydney was going to wear when Sydney was originally supposed to go out with Maxwell, like
Mm-hmm.
Sydney was not wearing floor length dress, but she was wearing like a silver suit and it like was knee length. Fran's just totally dressed to the nines.
Well,
Yeah.
almost. So to me personally, Fran's dress kind of looked like a bridesmaid dress to me, like that kind of event. I could be totally off.
No, it looked far more formal than dinner.
Yes.
I think, yeah, and I think it is also very peak early 90s, late 80s style too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with the tulip skirt and I think we read that more as bridesmaid, but I think that might have been just more like normal.
Interesting.
Other things too, just in terms of like plot points. Theoretically, well, and it could depend. This could be a reach, but since we have social media these days, there may have been more of an opportunity for like Fran or Maxwell to have looked into like Sydney before, and they may have found out before, unless of course she doesn't put that on social media.
Yeah. Well, I think you also definitely wouldn't have had a situation where like somebody who you're doing business with, you would not know that their father, like that their child had taken over the business.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's a
Um,
major faux pas that could be
yeah,
committed.
like I think that would also be like if for example, like Miss Babcock had gone to her website or like reached out in some way, I think it would have been very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Although, if you'll allow me to play devil's advocate for a moment, it's quite possible that Sidney Mercer Sr., or Mr. Sidney Mercer, shall we say, was still running the business, and he had brought his daughter on to also work on the business. And if Cece had called and asked for Sidney Mercer to send Sidney Mercer to the Sheffield home and didn't specify which Sidney Mercer, she could have very well thought she was talking to a secretary, not Sidney Mercer. And yes, I just used the name Sidney Mercer like 6 times in one sentence.
Fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then a different thing with the elevator scene where the lights go out. These days, I think people would be fumbling for their own smartphones
Oh, definitely.
and trying to like
Absolutely.
do that, and or turning on like the flashlight feature on it. So unfortunately, you may not have had that exchange.
Yeah.
About the emergency
No.
phone. Yeah.
No. Is that your iPhone in your pocket? No, slightly different.
But it begs the question, like, did you said that he had a tiny cell phone? Did Maxwell have a tiny cell phone in his pocket?
I think that was a joke, right? Because it was very big.
Honestly,
right?
I didn't even see the cell phone. I just knew he had it and it wasn't the smartphone.
Okay, got it.
So like I should have said, did you see his silly little dumb phone instead of his little cell phone? That probably would have been better.
Okay. But yeah, like, because presumably he had it if he was calling from the front door.
Maybe, although keep in mind, this is, 1995. Maybe people didn't carry their cell phone everywhere.
I
Yeah.
think in 95 they were still considered car phones, right?
Oh, so he probably called from the car.
Yeah, because
But he was saying goodbye, Miss Fine, like at
Oh,
the door.
I don't know. A
maybe he,
mystery.
Well, keep in
yeah.
mind the first cell phone was actually created in like 1970, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't
Yeah.
become popular. Like then, between then and like now, there were the car phones, and then after the car phones were the like, I guess I want to call them bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
after that, they started to get smarter and smarter and smarter. Now they're basically little mini computers that we carry around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Any
I'm
other 90s nostalgia?
that's all I have.
yeah, I think same.
Okay. So unfortunately, no kisses
Nope.
this week. So do you have any future fun, Debbie?
I always have future fun for us. First, we never see Sydney again. So whether she keeps Maxwell as a client is unresolved. Who knows? Second, just on the midlife crisis front, there's actually an episode we'll get to in a little bit. I think so it's later this season. It's called That's Midlife, where Maxwell actually has a full-blown midlife crisis, which is triggered in part by Fran beating him in a game of beginner's tennis. And so we see him, do some of those same things where like he dresses not like himself and he struggles. And then there's in the episode Kissing Cousins, which I think we talked about recently in another future fun segment. Fran is supposed to be a bridesmaid at her cousin's wedding, and Fran doesn't have a date, so she was thinking of bringing Val, and she tells her mother that, and her mother objects to it. And Fran's like, "What? Are you afraid the family's going to think I'm gay?" And Sylvia says, "That I don't mind. It's just that you couldn't do better than Val. I take issue with." So just kind of going along with like how very open-minded and accepting of people as they are. I just wanted to mention that. And then finally, and most notably for those who have seen the series and know how it ends, Fran is, shall we say, unlucky in elevators. This is not the only time she gets stuck in an elevator. In the penultimate episode of the series, she gets caught in another broken elevator, this time with Cece, and in a, shall we say, developing medical emergency. I won't say what it is, but anyway, Fran gets trapped in an elevator again.
With Cece. So then we're almost back to the wine cellar. And it's
Yep.
Correct.
nice.
So someday when we're when you guys are further along in the series, I would be very curious, knowing where I guess Niall's plot arc ends up.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching the episode with a friend today, and the friend wasn't very familiar with Nanny, and basically said it asked if Niles was gay, and I think Niles is very coded to some, like at some point, but obviously there are later things, and that's not the case. But I just think it's kind of interesting because I think there's some elements where I could see how that might have originally been the intention for that character.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Um,
treading lightly and not spoiling the series for those who have yet to watch it all the way through. Because
yes.
I tried very hard to, provide a little bit of future fun so people know what's coming, but not to give away huge spoilers and ruin the arc.
Yes.
So
Yes.
thank you for respecting that.
No spoilers.
but
Spoiler-free zone.
Yeah, but I can see what you're saying, Miranda, is that definitely there are times.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
So, shall we jump into episode rating?
I think we shall.
Okay. As a reminder, we rate the episodes 1 to 5 lipsticks. But again, to some extent, it's a bit arbitrary, but again, 1 lipsticks being the lowest, 5 being the highest. And Debbie, it's your turn to go first this week.
I'm actually okay going first this week because I know exactly what I'm going to give this episode. I'm giving it a 5. This is an episode that I enjoy watching. It's an episode I'm very familiar with. There is that delightful interaction between Fran and Maxwell in the elevator. I also enjoy the discussion between Fran and Sydney. It's, I think, all around a good episode, which, as we've kind of talked about before, is sort of ahead of its time and how accepting it is of Sydney. So I'm giving it a 5. How about you, Bernadette?
I again had a couple of things that I wasn't as good with, but I think I'm still gonna give it a 5. Primarily again, like the continuing Fran Maxwell line, like again, you see how disappointed she is, like forlorn she is with the prospect of Maxwell marrying someone else. You have again the last the last scene where she literally falls from the sky. I do appreciate whenever the show does that kind of, they're so oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Miranda.
I am going to give it a 4, mainly just because I think the actress who plays Sydney didn't do a great job. But everything else, I think I agree. Like I think the elevator scene, chef's kiss, very funny. I liked I think like one of the things I like about this show is it does a good job of building this world where, since we're only peeking in, but you have this idea of how things happen in the house regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Like Fran and Niles like racing for the jacuzzi tub, like because this has happened before.
Yeah.
Right. Like they've tried to do this before and they've, whatever. So I like those moments, and I think this episode had that in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yep.
Does
Any
anyone have?
other comment before we wrap up? Anything you've thought of that you wanted to address, or everybody good?
I'm good. Miranda?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me on yet again,
Yeah,
even if
thank you.
I couldn't always remember what happened.
No, that's perfect. I often phone a friend, being Debbie, to help me out in describing a scene. We really appreciate you joining us again.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
All
All
right.
right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 56, The Party's Over.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.